Disclaimer: the recovery operation is still developing. The following is accurate to the best available reporting on August 3rd, 2026.
This is the live location for Nims Dai. This is when he started yesterday at 4:33 in the morning, going toward Camp 3 from this ridge at an elevation of 6,166 meter. This is the start point, and then he continued up on this ridge. At one point, they have to leave this ridge and cross this massively snow-packed kind of a glacier gully, which has very, very high chances of getting an avalanche. They were supposed to climb and get to these black rocks to the right side of the screen and then continue up toward Camp 3. But while all these 10 climbers along with the Nirmal, Purja, they were right in the middle, the avalanche started 8:15 or 8:20. That's when the avalanche started, and within few moments his garment shows that he went several hundred meters down, and his body stopped down here at 5,935 meters, while the other climbers, some of them, their bodies were found further down, a few thousand meters below, onto the rocks. So some people also say that Nirmal Purja might be alive because they saw this movement from this location at 8:23 a.m. to the next location at 8:33. So this is there is like 10 minutes difference between these two locations. So this could be that the snow or the avalanche was still moving, or maybe at that point he was still conscious and he tried to get out of this place. But recent update on 31st of July past midnight shows that there is no more movement, and I don't think there is any signs of life, unfortunately. Now today at 5 p.m. Which is Pakistani time, 6 p.m. the rescue operation has been called off for the day. They will start again tomorrow for the search. So far they have confirmed that there are 4 dead bodies that have been recovered, out of which 2 have been identified. We hope for some miracle, but unfortunately the chances seem very, very slim.
What really happened on Broad Peak? And what can Nims Dai's final GPS track actually tell us? Was the alert too slow? At 5:33 in the morning on July 30th, 2026, Nirmal Nims Dai Purja's satellite tracker placed him on near Camp 2 on Broad Peak at approximately 6,166 meters. 90 minutes later, he climbed to roughly 6,430 meters. And just before 9 o'clock, his device transmitted from approximately 6,660 meters, somewhere between Camp 2 and Camp 3. Then the track suddenly fell. Within approximately 30 minutes, the device appeared more than 2,000 vertical feet lower on the mountain, and for several hours afterwards, the tracker continued transmitting. It even seemed to be moving slightly, and for a brief period, rescuers and the world believed that one of the world's greatest high-altitude mountaineers might still be alive. Let's take a look at this video. But was the tracker showing a living climber or merely a damaged device, shifting in snow and the steep terrain?
And there is another disturbing element. Several experienced climbers had left the Broad Peak after heavy snowfall that day.
Yes, that's right.
2 of them, Ian Overton and David Klein, had spent weeks studying and climbing this mountain. So the question is simply not that how could an avalanche happen? The real question is, what did the different teams know? And why did their decisions become so different?
Yes, absolutely. So let's jump into that. Let's jump into the question, what happened? So on the morning of July 30th, at least one large avalanche struck the normal route on Broad Peak's western side. So there were 10 climbers. They were caught between Camp 2 and Camp 3. And at approximately 6,600 to 6,660 meters, all 10 eventually were confirmed dead. The most darkest, terrible news. They were Nirmal Purja, Pur Bahadur Gurung, known as Yukta, Nima Sherpa, Kili Pemba Kilu Sherpa, Noang Tindu Sherpa, Gayalu Sherpa, and Pakistani climber Sohail Saki, American climber Mallory Geese, and Chinese climber Wang Zhong. There was also an Omani mountaineer, Nadira El Hardy. 6 of them were Nepali, a truly, truly dark day for Nepal. And the others were coming from Pakistan, the United States, China, and Oman.
Well, something important has been lost in some headlines. These were not necessarily 10 people moving under one single leader as one conventional expedition. It was not a conventional expedition.
Right, right.
They included climbers and guides associated with several operations. They happened to be moving through the same dangerous section of mountain when the avalanche released.
So there were like different teams of people and they just kind of came together somehow. So that's really interesting because that matters, because responsibility, communication, and decision making may have been divided among the different teams. And so the question arises, who was evaluating the weather? Who was evaluating the snowpack? And who was watching the trackers from base camp? Was there one overall coordinator, as in Nims, or was each team monitoring its own people? Those questions still remain unanswered. Ian Overton and David Klein. Before discussing Nim's decision, we need to understand what happened to these 2 climbers now, because there are reports now being described as the men who actually walked away were Ian Overton and Klein. So Ian Overton is an American emergency room nurse, and David Klein is an experienced Hungarian high-altitude climber. They had previously attempted Nanga Parbat together during the winter of 2012 to 2013. Wow, that's quite a few years ago. So that expedition nearly ended terribly. Their party encountered an avalanche, another climber suffered frostbite, and Overton developed high-altitude cerebral edema. That's scary. So Ian later said, I returned to the States unsure if I'd ever want to try an expedition again. He stayed away from climbing for approximately a year before eventually returning.
Well, that history is really important. Ian was not someone who had never experienced an avalanche or altitude illness. He knew how quickly an expedition could change from adventure to survival. During the earlier part of the 2026 Broad Peak expedition, prior to this one, however, conditions appeared manageable. Overton described base camp and the normal summer climbing environment as surprisingly pleasant compared with his winter experience on Nanga Parbat.
Oh yeah, winter something else. Yeah. I mean, in the middle of July, Klein also believed that avalanche danger was comparatively low. He said much of the unstable material that could slide appeared to have already released. So on July 19th, Klein climbed for approximately 19 hours with the Pakistani rope fixing team, which is very interesting. So he ultimately turned around somewhere between 50 and 70 vertical meters below the true summit. Oh, he was almost there. He was climbing without bottled oxygen as well. And Ian Overton had already descended to the base camp by then because altitude was affecting him. So he went through the altitude sickness again.
So they never made the summit?
No.
Okay. Well.
And what happened after that?
Well, then the mountain changed. Heavy snowfall reportedly began around July 22nd. The client considered, I think, making another attempt, but concluded that sunshine alone was not enough. This is a very important point to note. Fresh snow needed several stable days either to bond with the existing surface or release naturally. So I have my own conclusion on this. We will talk about this later.
Okay. So it's a judgment call though, because you can give it a certain days, but then you also feel the mountain as well. So that must have been within the judgment decisions as well. So, I mean, here is the crucial distinction. I haven't actually found a verified post-accident statement from Ian Overton as of August 3rd, but the strongest publicly reported explanation of why the pair left came directly from David Klein. It was on National Geographic. We also do not have proof that either man personally approached Nims and told him not to climb. So we should not claim that Ian and David warned Nims at all, and Nims ignored them. No, that's not the way that it was. We don't know yet. The evidence currently supports a narrower statement that Ian Overton and David Klein independently abandoned their expedition after the mountain received the heavy snowfall. So I think it's from their prior experience that kind of played a part in how they decided to go about this mountain, because Nanga Parbat ended up being a tough climb for them, and they don't want to take any chances at all. The weather was quite difficult for the few days prior to the team leaving from Camp 2 to Camp 3. There was a pretty heavy snowfall and a pretty bad storm. Why exactly was Nims climbing Broad Peak?
I don't think this was the original plan, was it?
It wasn't the original plan, no. Nims, after climbing G2, decided he's already there. It was supposed to be done at a different time, but because they were already there and there was a small window of having good weather, and of course he's done it before and he knows the mountains really well. Obviously a mountain has its own weather. A mountain is its own mountain. We can't take past experiences and bring that into the new one. A new one's a new one, right? But yeah, it was just kind of added in last minute. So we'll never really know truly what his decision was because the entire team has been wiped out regarding that matter. There was a report of one of his team members, a Pakistani climber, who was at G2, finished that and said that he just pressed on even in difficult weather. But Nims is known for that. He knows when it's safe enough, but he made it. But then during this expedition, he ended up coming down with one of the sick climbers. So he could have been in that avalanche as well. So yeah, Broad Peak, it wasn't originally part of Nims' Pakistan plan, but he said he initially intended to climb just Gasherbun 2, and then before traveling to Pakistan, however, he reviewed his record on the 14 8,000 meter mountains, and he realized that adding Broad Peak would leave only Choi Oyu, one mountain, between him and becoming the first person to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks twice without supplemental oxygen. So Broad Peak therefore became a late addition. So it was a timing thing then. Before beginning the climb, he wrote, "Broad Peak, I ask for nothing but safe passage up and back down." He always prayed before.
Too sad. This leads to an uncomfortable but necessary discussion. Did the record influence the decision to remain there or not? That is the question, and we cannot state that as fact that it did, but we can ask whether being only 2 mountains away from an unprecedented achievement may affect how an elite athlete interpret risk. Because I've been an athlete myself and I know you take risks, and it's very difficult to shift away from the goal when you know there's another goal right there to achieve. You need strategic coaching call there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not because the person is reckless, but because confidence is built through repeatedly surviving situations that will overwhelm almost anyone else.
Except Nims.
Right, but we have a personal experience climbing things when we always returned back. Whenever it was foggy, we know we can't see the summit. Just go back.
Yeah.
There's another day you can do it. But
Absolutely.
maybe all these expeditions, they are very expensive. And
Oh yeah, that plays a big part in it too. And also, I mean, even if the mountain seemed that it was so easy, the weather will make it 1,000 times more difficult, obviously. And this is,
Right.
This is like climbing winter ascents.
Yeah.
Well, it's winter and summer, obviously. It's cold there, right?
yeah, Nims,
But I mean, Nims had, my favorite quote of all time by Nims was, "Giving up is not in the blood, sir." So that thing about him, like there was something else there. It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. And
Right.
because of this reason, Nims had completed rescues. He's climbed K2 in winter without oxygen, which has never been done. He's broken speed records and functioned at extreme altitude with an ability very few people possess. He was born with it. And success of that magnitude creates expertise, but it can also create a dangerous belief that experience will provide an answer to every situation.
And maybe that is the tragedy of objective hazard. Strength can help with exhaustion. Experience can help with route finding. Leadership can help when another climber collapses, but none of those abilities can stop an entire snow slope from, releasing above you. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get into reconstructing the GPS track. So on the screen, you can see that the on-screen GPS timeline is at 5:33 a.m. at 6,166 meters. He's near Camp 2 at 7:03 a.m. near Camp 2 at 6,430 meters. At Camp 3 just before 9 a.m. about 6,660 meters, which is the last upper slope position. And that's where they reach that crux, you would call it, like the hardest part. It's the most scariest part where they're crossing through that dangerous avalanche terrain.
Yeah, right above this snow slope.
Yeah, right above the snow slope. And you have to cross over and then make a turn back, curving, and then up the peak, depending on which route you take. But you always have to go through that heavily avalanche, just that very risky spot. And roughly 30 minutes later, while they're heading through, I think Nims was leading. The GPS tracker is more than 2,000 feet lower. And the avalanche displacement later is now reading around 6,050 meters. And then it continued transmitting. And it was very low at this point. It's important to note, like, they're gaining fast. He gained like 264 meters. Pretty fast. And Nadira Al Hardy's tracker was at the same spot. And then you saw that Nims was roughly 2,000 feet below that ping. And then she was even lower, further down. So her body just went right off the mountain. But the GPS also started reporting that it was moving as well after it landed in that lower position.
I wonder what Nadira's GPS said. The reported GPS reconstruction then showed Nims' device moving approximately 49 meters sideways. That's
He was probably...
That's a lot. 49 meters is a lot.
Yeah.
While descending another 44 meters.
Absolutely.
That's kind of making a square.
Yeah.
Ish. That appeared movement, created hope.
It created the hope, yeah. I was imagining that he was like climbing out and moving a bit here and there. I don't want to picture, and I think the world doesn't want to picture what was actually happening in those final moments.
Mingma David Sherpa, Nim's business partner, told colleagues that the location still appeared to be moving and urgently requested a rescue right there.
He jumped on the helicopter right away and he joined the rescue expedition. So there's an important technical warning there. The device reportedly showed a speed of 0. So satellite trackers can continue transmitting after falling. And in a steep valley beside cliffs inside avalanche debris or beneath the snow, their calculated location can actually wander because of poor satellite geometry and signal reflection. Therefore, the GPS proved that the device moved violently down the mountain, but it can't really prove that Nims moved under his own power after the avalanche. I mean, he fell quite a distance.
Well, once the body is found at, approximately 5,700 meters, the magnitude of avalanche became even clearer that was a big avalanche. The mountain had carried one of the strongest climbers in history almost a vertical kilometer down its face. That's...
Like, imagine that.
Yeah, against the gravity.
With
the gravity.
Yeah. Nims was invincible, but the mountain's a mountain. This may become the most consequential question in any future investigation, actually. When was the alarm raised? Tracker data indicates that the climber stopped ascending and fell sometime around 9 to 9:30 in the morning. But the first Alpine Club statement described the avalanche as occurring around midday. So Explorers Web later reported that the Alpine Club was not informed until approximately 10 p.m. That's almost 13 hours after the avalanche.
That's a speculation. Somebody said, "Oh, there was an avalanche." Oh, when? That was in the morning sometimes. So
Yeah, it was
they
a
just-
speculation by Neila Kiani, a reporter, who said they only found out at 10 p.m.
Well, how could 10 trackers suddenly drop hundreds of meters without somebody at base camp recognizing the pattern? Was it maybe, which I suspect it was a cornice that they were walking over and did not know, and then put a lot of weight on it, and then all of a sudden it shifted from underneath and took everybody down. It could be that.
Yeah, fresh. It was all fresh snow, right? It wasn't
But
packed down.
the question is, were the devices being watched live?
That's
What
another
did
question we
each
have.
company believe another team had contacted the authorities? Was there no shared emergency communication center? Was the avalanche visible from base camp? And if the video really was recorded from below, when was the footage reviewed and when was the emergency reported?
Well, we must also be careful. A faster alarm does not automatically mean the climbers could have survived. The forces shown by the tracker data were catastrophic. So helicopters may still have been unable to reach the location safely at that time as well because it was bad weather. But the distinction matters. The possibility that an earlier response would not have changed the outcome does not make a communication delay acceptable. So that question actually must be answered separately. Now let's move on to the search and recovery.
Well, it's the same day, pretty much. The Pakistan Army helicopters, drones, and ground rescue began searching the Broad Peak. Or weather repeatedly limited the helicopter operation, and it always does.
Yeah.
The early reports said that the bodies of Nadira and the Bahadur Gurung had been recovered.
Yes, right away.
Those were the first ones recovered, I believe.
Yep.
Officials also reported the remains identified as Mallory.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, it was partial remains.
Oh.
So yeah, that's terrible.
But the drone footage located above several more climbers, but the terrain remained extremely steep and exposed.
Yes,
Well,
so they had to shut down the rescue overnight as well. They couldn't even get to them right away.
but the good thing today is the drone can go to places where you couldn't go before, and
They can see they saw the debris field right away.
right.
They kind of knew where they were, but of course, I'm sure it was a vertical terrain, so that's, very difficult terrain. So by August 3rd, an 8-person ground team finally had located Nim's body at approximately 5,700 meters. And they moved his body towards Camp 1.
Well, I think Mingma and Sirbaz Khan, that was the name, and the other Nepali and Pakistani rescuers climbed from Camp 1 towards the accident area.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
they did. Yeah, they were the ones. And they also located Wang Zhang, Nima Sherpa, and Kili Pemba Sherpa.
Okay.
And Kilu's body was brought further down while the other remains were still kind of positioned on difficult terrain around the lower mountain. Searchers had reached or located 8 of the 10 climbers. At that point, the locations of Sohail Saki are still, and Nawang Tindu Sherpa, they're still missing. They're not confirmed yet,
Even today?
even today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the recovery team requested a helicopter, I think. The
Yep.
long-line operation, in such a maneuver, rescuers or remains are suspended beneath the helicopter on a cable,
Yes.
allowing the aircraft to avoid landing.
Yeah.
Well, these operations are regularly conducted in Nepal, I think, but are far less routine in Pakistan because, the availability of resources and
Yep.
but military aviation authorities must consider the altitude, the steepness of the slope, the rotor clearance, and wind, and the lives of the pilots.
Yep.
At the same time, you don't want to lose more people. If the long line request is rejected, rescuers may have to drag or even lower the bodies toward the flatter area known as the Japanese camp on the very mountain, the Broad Peak.
So,
Oh, there's another question now. Like, how
yes.
much danger should living rescuers accept to recover those who have already died? I know it's a sad question, but it is.
That is what it is. So, how about, was this a foreseeable avalanche? Heavy snowfall had occurred for approximately a week. Other climbers had left because the new snow needed time to settle. That means the unstable conditions were foreseeable in a general sense, but without a formal avalanche investigation, we cannot say that the precise slope failure at the exact time was predictable.
We can just speculate that it was a cornice, which most probably is, and also, was anyone inspecting the cornice before stepping on? That's the question. Or they were just assuming that, people have been here before and they just passed and...
Or just saying, would everyone have known that this
Right.
exact slope would release at that exact second, right?
Yeah.
Did record pressure affect the decision? Record pressure? Nims's record pressure?
Yeah, the making the record, yeah.
Nims publicly explained that Broad Peak was added because it would leave only Choi Oyu in his historic no oxygen project. That provides a motive to climb. It does not actually prove that the record caused a bad safety decision.
No, I think the record decision is just to know that, we should do this. That's the decision definitely affected, but not that at that time you should go now because the weather is this and that. Maybe not at that time.
Permits purchased, right? Yeah.
But the commercial and record-based mountaineering does create psychological pressure. Remember that.
Sponsors.
Permits, they have been purchased and clients have traveled across the world. The clients, guides have been hired, weather window are closing for the season. Social media audiences are watching, sponsors and businesses are involved. Turning around maybe the correct mountaineering decision while simultaneously, feeling like failure in every other part of the expedition. It could be another factor.
So does exceptional ability create exceptional risk? So Nims built his identity around the belief that nothing is impossible. We love this. This is very inspiring. That belief inspired millions and helped elevate Nepali climbers from the background of Western mountaineering stories to the center of the narrative. They built businesses, they were building livelihoods, but the mountains do not respond to identity records or reputations.
Nope. Perhaps the most difficult lesson in this is that the stronger the climber, the more situations they can survive, and the harder it may become to recognize that one situation nobody can survive.
Absolutely. So who was responsible for monitoring the expedition? There were 10 climbers from several teams. They were traveling through the same corridor. Did each company have an independent base camp manager, or were they all relying on Nims? Were trackers monitored continuously? Was there a written emergency protocol? And who had authority to call the helicopters? And why was the apparent avalanche signature not completely escalated? There was quite a bit of danger there for that fresh snow.
No. I think the future investigation should not concentrate only on the decision to climb. It must examine the entire system of climb, like weather interpretation, team communication, tracker monitoring, emergency notification, helicopter readiness, shared responsibility between the expedition companies, and the ability of Pakistani rescuers to conduct high-altitude long-line operation. This is very important to note. When you go climb there, do you know that there is rescue operation people available?
Right. And in a timely manner.
Right.
Obviously, they'll get there eventually, but it needs to be there when you need it.
Right.
Right? What should GPS trackers be used for? So the trackers provide extraordinary information, but they can also create false hope. Moving dot can represent a living person, a device sliding in snow, but a continued avalanche movement, GPS drift, and satellite error caused by the surrounding terrain can really confuse and cause dampers or, make it difficult to actually determine whether...
Right.
Because you're putting a lot more people in harm's way as well with the rescue.
The tracker is not going to go upwards. Remember that.
That's for sure.
It's
So you
gonna-
know they're, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
When trackers going upwards.
Yeah, future expeditions may need a protocol requiring tracker data to be combined with the speed readings, altitude changes,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
The check-in messages, emergency activation, radio contact, observations from the base camp, and data from other climbers' trackers. It's very
Absolutely.
important.
I think AI can probably come in here and help us improve some
maybe.
of the
Yeah.
GPS tracking data
Yeah.
as well. So, in conclusion, I would say this disaster should not be reduced to the death of one celebrity climber. Nims Dai, by the way, my favorite person in the world, was the most famous person on the mountain. But 9 other lives were lost, and they included some of the strongest Nepali high
Kilu
altitude
Pemba
workers.
was there. There's
Yep.
other relatively newer but not really new climbers.
Absolutely.
Pakistani climber who advocated for local guides. He could speak the language. The Omani educator, who broke.
She was an environmental activist as well.
Oh, the lady. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And even the American climber, she was kind of reinventing her life. She closed down her shop, her Pilates shop, and she was reinventing herself to actually bring more awareness to sports in general to her area. So she's using, bridging the gap by using mountaineering,
Right.
And attempting her first 8,000 meter mountain.
Yeah. The tracker data, it tells you a lot, but I don't think it tells you, who made the decision and why the decision was made. Or it doesn't tell us who saw the snowfall as acceptable.
Right.
It doesn't tell us whether different teams discussed the risk together or the decision was made alone and other people followed the decision.
Yeah.
And it doesn't explain why an event visible in multiple trackers may not have reached rescue authorities for many hours.
Yeah, they were waiting for quite a while. So there should be no rush to accuse people who can no longer explain their decisions. But respect for the dead must not mean refusing to ask the questions, because the purpose of investigating a mountain disaster is not to destroy a legacy. It's just to make sure the same chain of decisions does not take another 10 lives. The last time we saw a disaster with that many people was the K2 disaster, where there were over 11 people that just vanished.
Yeah,
Single avalanche.
But regardless, whatever has happened and whoever made that decision, right decision, wrong decision, bad luck, I would say rest in peace. All of them. And
all of them, yes. Rest in peace, everybody. And we pray that your families are, have a healthy journey to recovery and can express their grief in ways to help heal them. And I just want to bring up a couple of posts that I read, and it was just perfect. They were perfectly well said. Reinhold Messner, another one of our favorite mountain climbers, he said it, just worded it perfectly. And I'm just going to read this post out for you guys. I have always been a reflective person, but these days have made me even more so. Some of the messages reaching me have left me saddened, not only because of loss, but because of how quickly morality can fade once someone is no longer with us. At the same time, I see how often mountaineering is portrayed as a last great romantic adventure, especially on social media. But that is not real life. The mountains are not romantic. They are beautiful, yes, but they are so cold, exhausting, indifferent, and sometimes unforgiving. Behind every summit are countless people whose work, strength, and dedication make these journeys possible. That too is part of the evolution of alpinism. Yet beyond all progress, equipment, technology, and rescue systems, one truth remains unchanged. The greatest expedition is the one within ourselves. To walk into the mountains with the awareness that no one may be able to save you, and that today could be your last day, is perhaps the deepest form of self-knowledge. Not because we seek death, but because only the acceptance of our own vulnerability allows us to meet life with complete honesty. And with that, we'll end it here, guys. Thank you for tuning in. This is Reimbach Arcane, and we'll be back with another story for you. Take care, and make sure you comment below and join in the discussions. So some questions for you are, what do you believe needs the closest investigation? The decision to continue after the snowfall, the apparent delay in raising the alarm, coordination between 4 different teams, Pakistan's limited high altitude rescue capability, or the psychological pressure created by records and commercial expeditions. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.